Now on Money Talk 1010 AM, it's the Morgan Streetman Show. Morgan and Roxanne Wilder are discussing everything from world, national, and local issues to information from the unknown. And since Morgan's an attorney, there'll probably be a little something from the law. Now, here are Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder.
Now, guys, I just hit my wall, my Monday afternoon wall. Last night caught up with me.
Oh, no.
Because I stayed up late. No, not lamenting the lightning loss. You know, you can't control those things. And
when you say late, what do you mean? Like 9, 10 o'clock?
Oh, it was late
actually,
last night. That's what she watched.
Right. I stayed up to watch Game of Thrones.
Okay.
So that was 9 to 10. And then there's a good 45 minutes of your body calming down after the adrenaline's been going through your veins when you're watching something so exciting. Not that there were any battle scenes last night, but it was just an exciting episode.
No spoilers.
No spoilers.
I
no
understand
spoilers.
there are people out there that get very upset if you spoil anything involving Game of Thrones.
And the funny thing is, usually I don't watch it until Monday, so I get that. I get that.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil anything for anyone because a lot of times I watch Monday for the reason I just described. So
were there any dragons in this episode?
Yes,
what I was going to
a really great dragon scene, but I mean that's not a spoiler. It was a good dragon scene.
Well, I think there are pretty much dragons in much of that. I mean, I've actually never watched an episode of that. I probably shouldn't say that.
You
out
would
loud.
like it.
Oh, you'd love it.
You'd love it.
Yeah.
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 Pat, you liked it?
I did not watch it. I went night-night at 7:30.
Is that what you call it? Night?
Oh, yeah, I do that every
Pass
day. I go night-night now.
Also known as crash and burn, right?
It just drives Amy crazy.
Just
Goes,
ran
why
out
do
of
you
gas?"
talk that way? I go night-night, nighty-night.
Oh, my goodness.
Having some fun with it.
So it was quite a day yesterday.
Yeah.
Not good for
Lot
our local
going on.
team, though.
Yeah, why don't we start out with our local interest segment then?
Okay, the Lightning, they're really disappointing us. They've lost 3 in a row in the playoffs, and I do kind of blame us,
Yeah.
not in this room specifically,
Oh,
but in
the
the
fans.
media, the fans, the whole town. We've all talked like this is a no-brainer, like, okay, this is our year
We
for the
got it.
cup. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because we've had such a good season, and that doesn't always mean you're going to have a good postseason.
right.
As we're watching right now. So the Lightning have to win tomorrow night,
Just
and
to
then
stay
they
alive.
have to keep winning.
Oh, they have to win every game from here on out, right?
Well, for the next series.
Yeah,
I mean,
they had to win
this
4 games
series,
in a row
yes, 4
now.
games in a row, which they've certainly won 4 games in a row during the regular season. But what's scary is they haven't lost 3 games in a row.
You know,
which is what
before
they just
this
did.
before this started, before the series started, if you were to say the position they were in, you would have been laughed out of town.
Yeah.
Then
Right.
nobody, they'd have said, you're out of your mind.
Well,
They're just too good, too
I
strong,
felt
too
bad the
fast.
Blue Jackets were going to get just annihilated.
hammered.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Lightning, when they finished up the regular season, they actually tied the winningest
Right, with
in
Detroit.
terms of number of wins, which is the New Jersey Devils back from the mid-'90s.
No, Detroit Red Wings.
Oh, sorry, you're right. You're right. Okay. Well, see, shows what I know about hockey.
That's okay.
But I do remember the Red Wings in the 90s were the stuff,
And
right?
that was
I
them.
was thinking
Yep.
it was the Devils. But okay, the Devils were very good in the mid-'90s too.
Sure.
I remember, well, because I remember driving down from Jacksonville to watch the Tampa Bay Lightning, and maybe it was the Red Wings. My mind was telling me it's the New Jersey Devils that they played. And boy, watching the two of them play, it was like watching, the varsity team and then, the amateur league. And believe me, the
and
Lightning.
it was the amateur league if it was their expansion team when they just started. It
right, because they
probably
had just started. They couldn't pass. They couldn't do anything. They were making other teams look like other teams make them look today when they play with
Who did
them.
we have back then? Roman Hammerlick. That was our big name player.
Okay,
Remember that name?
Not really, to be
Okay.
honest, but
I'm just trying to go back in time.
you know
She
how
used
much
to
I
be a
focus on
sportscaster.
sports. Yeah,
She was so she knows
she would
stuff
know.
we don't.
She would know.
From certain eras, I know certain things. Right?
Now, is this right? Did I see that the Blue Jackets? Is that the name of them? The Blue Jackets?
Columbus Blue Jackets.
What is a Blue Jacket, by the way?
It has to do with it's a war reference. It's a historical. Is it a Civil War reference?
Okay.
Let me
Probably
find
so.
that out. I believe it is though.
Well, okay.
It's not a type of bee.
Yeah, I'm like, is there? Did I in Ohio?
Jackets,
They don't
no.
have yellow jackets in Ohio. They got these blue colored bees. But now the coach there,
John
did I
Tortorella.
recognize him?
Yeah. Yes, you did.
yeah.
Yes, you did.
Now, do you think that has anything to do with the situation?
Well, I was actually thinking about that a little bit. First of all, I mean, how many players? This is a question for Andrew Moranis. He's our producer on Q105 because he covers the team. He's out there on a regular basis. But I'd have to look back. I sincerely doubt that there any players.
Left over.
I would make a bet that there are no players left on this team because hockey they have such, especially the Lightning team, they're so young. So I don't think there are any players that John Tortorella has, not to say he hasn't coached one maybe who was from another team and now plays with the Lightning. But I will tell you something I thought about recently. Marty St. Louis in January, he signed on as special teams assistant coach, or somehow he's helping the special teams on the Blue Jackets.
Well, there wouldn't be anything wrong with that. I mean, you're allowed to hire people and do that kind of stuff. I was kind of wondering. I mean, I didn't see the result of last night's game, unfortunately, before I got in here, and you were telling me about it. But I was almost wondering, I mean, are they trying to put themselves in the biggest deficit so that they can have the most dramatic comeback at this point? Because
I don't think
nothing
anybody
else
tries to do that.
No, nobody tries to do that. Okay.
No.
Okay. Because that's what they've done. That's what they've done. They put themselves...
They're so dramatic, these Lightning players, yes.
Well, I mean, they basically put themselves in a position they have to lose or they have to win the next 4 games, or they lose and they're out of it.
Mm-hmm. I know.
What a shame that would be.
I'm still looking, guys. I'm still looking for Blue Jacks, the exact historical reference, but we'll have it for you.
What about
the show is over?
What about the fans that went out and bought the jerseys for the playoffs?
Oh.
They said, and a jersey, if you get it lettered, you know how much it cost? $300.
Ooh.
A jersey lettered with your name on it or a player's name on it, $300.
My goodness.
So
one wonders why.
I mean, getting ready for the playoffs and buy the new jersey and
get to wear it twice.
No.
Oh.
Ohio Civil War history. The Blue Jackets that's what they're inspired by. That's
there you
where
go.
The name comes from.
There you go. Well, just in time for the second Civil War, we've got teams named after teams on the first Civil War. So just what we wanted to see. We wanted to take a quick look back this week and talk a little bit more, or at least hear a little bit more about those criminal referrals. You remember last week we told you that Devin Nunes on Sunday Morning Futures with Maria Bartiromo had announced that he was going to be making 8 criminal referrals to the new Attorney General, William Barr, last week. So we understand that those referrals were made last week, and there were 8 of them. And remember, 5 of them were specific and 3 were more general. Well, we didn't get last week to share with you what Devin Nunes had to say as he tried to explain some of the details of these various referrals. So we wanted to see if we could squeeze that in this week as our quick look back segment. Let's hear from House member Chairman Devin Nunes.
All of these are classified or sensitive, and so because a lot of them could contain sensitive or classified information. 5 of them are what I would call straight-up referrals, so just referrals that name someone and name the specific crimes. Those crimes are lying to Congress, misleading Congress, leaking classified information. So 5 of them are those types. There are 3 that I think are more complicated. So you mentioned conspiracy. So the question on conspiracy is what, there's the conspiracy statute, and then what do they need to look at under that statute? So on the first one is FISA abuse and other matters. We believe there was a conspiracy to lie to the FISA court, mislead the FISA court by numerous individuals that all need to be investigated and looked at, and we believe the statute is the conspiracy statute. The second conspiracy one is involving manipulation of intelligence. That also could ensnarl many Americans. And so that's kind of the second one. As you know, we've had a lot of concerns with the way intelligence was used. So that would be kind of the 2 conspiracy recommendations, referrals that we're making. The third is what I would call a global leak referral. So there are about a dozen highly sensitive, classified information leaks that were given to only a few reporters over the last 2.5+ years.
And that's pretty serious, I think. A lot of those classified leaks, which some of the actual leakers have been a little bit cavalier about, like James Comey, about writing up those memos, which he only got to know the information in those memos by being the director of the FBI. That's the only way he got into the room to have a private meeting with the president.
Sure.
And then he released those, remember, through his friend Jonathan Richman to the New York Times and other media outlets. I mean, basically to the public. And there are real issues with that. And he's never come up with what I've heard to be a coherent explanation for why he thinks he was allowed to leak that classified information. So, we're going to have the hope is that some of this does come home to roost, because it looks like, we've certainly covered, there has just been a complete lawlessness about the way that the Department of Justice has operated over the last 4 or 5 years. And it's been a political lawlessness. So they've been operating on behalf of a political party, the Democrat Party, against the Republicans. Now, you can even find some people who would argue that they've operated on behalf of the Republicans with some of what they did with the Hillary Clinton stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, we can disagree about whose team they're on, but I think we can all agree that they're not behaving appropriately for our law enforcement in this country. They're not supposed to be choosing political sides and trying to assist one party or the other, no matter the situation. I think we can also, from what Congressman Nunes told us, and he's a former chairman. I mentioned he's chairman, but he's former chairman. I think we can guess at a couple of the names of the people who've been referred and some of the people who are going to be swept up in this. And it's things like James Comey, because he was a big leaker. How about Andrew McCabe, who was a big leaker and then lied about it? How about Peter Strzok for all of the political machinations that he was involved in? And I'm sure there's many more. We got a lot to cover when we come back.
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. You know, some prognosticators are saying Trump has a chance at a 2020 win.
Ooh.
Simply because you have the Democrats who are going so far to the left.
Right.
But also because he's adhered to his promises that he's made, his campaign promises. The one that he hasn't adhered to, because he's been met with a lot of resistance, is related to immigration. But now we're seeing a little bit of headway, or are we?
Well, we are seeing a little bit of headway, hopefully. We covered how he was down at the wall a couple of weeks ago for a press conference, and there's some question as to exactly how much of the wall is being built, etc. Now, I looked at it, and, if we built a mile a day, it would take us something like 10 years to build. So this is a really big project that we would have to throw a lot of money and people at to get it built, promptly, like within a year or two. So I don't know if he's going to end up getting the wall built. I'm going to guess he's not going to get the wall built before 2020, and I'm going to bet you money that that's a campaign issue again. And he's going to say, look, I've been trying to do it, and I've been frustrated by the other side. And that certainly has been the case in a lot of instances. And, one of the ways that the Democrats have been really excellent at frustrating President Trump's agenda is by filing these lawsuits in selective fora. So they generally choose, as we know, the Ninth Circuit, and they generally choose within the Ninth Circuit the Northern District of California, which is San Francisco, which is by and large considered to be one of the most liberal jurisdictions in the entire federal judiciary. And they, by and large, they win. And what happens is they file suit on a matter, and they ask for a nationwide injunction. And what happens is the judge says, and it's usually a liberal-appointed judge, and we'll leave aside this idea that there are liberal judges and conservative judges and just say they're all judges. But it is pretty interesting how they always pick the same group of judges to go to and ask for something. So if that were truly the case, you'd think every now and then they'd pick somebody, I don't know, maybe in the 11th Circuit. Why not give Atlanta something to do or go up to New York or something? But they just keep going to San Francisco. So there must be some reason they keep choosing San Francisco. But God forbid anybody say that there are liberal and conservative judges. So but what we wanted to point out, this I thought was pretty interesting, was the Ninth Circuit actually handed President Trump a win on one of his immigration policies. So what the Democrats had done was they ran off to San Francisco, a federal district judge, and they got a nationwide injunction that said you cannot return asylum seekers who are not from Mexico to Mexico. And remember, folks, when you want to apply for asylum, the rule is that you have to apply in the first country that you enter after you leave your country. So if you're from Honduras and you're going into Mexico, you have to apply for asylum in Mexico. You don't get to just sort of walk through Mexico and apply for asylum in the U.S. when you get here. So the Trump administration had a reasonable, lawful policy that, okay, if you are here and you've passed through Mexico, we're sending you back to Mexico to apply for asylum because that's what international law says. All we're doing is following the law, right? But nevertheless, of course, this is a horrible thing. And the Democrats, they put together some group to sue the president. And they say, this is terrible. You can't send people back to Mexico. Do you know what could happen to them in Mexico? It's like a wild land down there. So it's completely wrong. And, of course, the liberal judge in San Francisco completely agrees with them and enters a nationwide injunction. Well, the Ninth Circuit's finally come forward, the adults in the room, I suppose, and they said, no, actually, he's exactly right on the law, and this is exactly what he's supposed to do, and what he's allowed to do under the law. And thank goodness they did that versus just, toeing the line and forcing the president to have to go to the Supreme Court, where it would take us another year to year and a half to get this finally worked out, kind of like the last time. Remember when President Trump said, from these 6 or 7 nations, we're not going to accept any more immigrants because basically I think there's a high degree of terrorist risk coming from the immigrants in these nations. And remember, they got the nationwide injunction. So you can't do that. President Trump is a racist and he hates all Muslims and he hates people from outside of this country. And that's all this is about. And of course, the Ninth Circuit backed up the little liberal judge, the one man or woman who put a stop to that. They backed them up. And I believe it was a man in that case because it was actually in Hawaii that they picked for that particular forum. But nevertheless, finally it went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said what anybody who would read the law and was intellectually honest would know. And that is, President Trump is completely, unquestionably allowed to do what he's doing. And that's the case here, too. So thankfully, the panel of judges on the Ninth Circuit finally got it together and recognized that this is, you can't run a country like this. We can't have these individual hyper-liberal judges in some little town just completely upending the president's agenda on a whim. And they're not even right on the law. I mean, that's just it about makes my head want to explode. As somebody who works in the law and somebody who deals with judges, it's just so shocking to me how they could get it so wrong. And I hate to say this, but they must not be looking at it very closely. And that's pretty sad.
That's scary.
Yeah, if you're going to enter a nationwide injunction without doing the actual analysis, or I guess our other option is they're being nakedly political. They're only doing it they don't care what the law says. They don't view their role as being a judge to say what the law says, not what it should be. That's the rule of law. They instead think, well, I'm going to make the law say what I think it should say. Forget what the legislature said. Forget what Congress said. I'm going to make it say what I think it should say. And that's the attitude, unfortunately, of a lot of liberal justices. So cheers to President Trump on a win finally in the Ninth Circuit and a win on the issue of immigration. Now, speaking of immigration, I guess we're going to be bringing Julian Assange back into this country, it looks like, shortly.
And his cat.
I don't know if you saw the video of him being carried out of the Ecuadorian embassy. Mm-hmm. Now, the timing on this, I mean, there's a lot to dive into here. And, we only have an hour show here. And that's a big disappointment, frankly, to me in a lot of ways, because I think we could talk about this Julian Assange issue for a couple of hours. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting stuff. And get into an understanding of, wait a minute, is he a journalist? Is what he's doing journalism, or is it something else? And we hear those arguments, and I don't think we've got the time to get into it and do it justice. And I don't want to just scratch the surface on that issue. But that's one that I think you really need to do some looking into. And I'll have to caution you because what I've been reading in the U.S. media is almost by and large to a one very negative against Julian Assange. In fact, I saw an article in The Atlantic, that bastion of liberalism, The Atlantic Monthly, which is, like the magazine for New Yorkers. I mean, New York City, all the intellectual elite up there, they love The Atlantic. All my friends from law school, they just can't forward me enough articles from The Atlantic. They think that's just the gospel. All right? Well, I mean, when you look at The Atlantic, it says, hey, don't feel too bad for Julian Assange. Boy, it highlights all this negative, oh, he's a narcissist. And look, we've all heard this. I'm sure Julian Assange is probably personally a terrible person on a person-to-person basis. He apparently never holds a door for anybody. He's just kind of a jerk. Hey, and that's all fine. I mean, and I'm all for you saying, hey, I don't personally like Julian Assange, but let's not confuse the issue here. This is not about whether we personally like Assange or not, and whether or not we should look the other way as he's being charged with something that maybe he really shouldn't be charged with. But you know what? He's such a despicable person. Maybe we shouldn't jump in and save him. Mm-hmm. Maybe we should just let him get his just desserts this time. And that, of course, is the position that the Atlantic Monthly took. And I'm sure that's the position, by and large, of the liberal intelligentsia in this country, is that Julian Assange isn't worth saving, so who really cares if the law is followed in his case? He deserves what he gets. And I don't think that's true. But now let me bring you to what does Morgan Streetman want to point out about this? Because this, I think, is pretty important. It's the timing of it all. The timing of it all. Folks, think about the timing of this arrest. What is the one thing that Julian Assange has the power to do? He can blow the entire Russian conspiracy narrative out of the water. Because remember, the entire Russian conspiracy narrative is based on the falsehood that the Russians hacked the DNC server, which is not what occurred. That is not what happened.
The server was never hacked.
The server was never hacked, and guess what? Nobody's ever examined the server. The DNC wouldn't turn it over to the FBI. And I'm sorry, I thought the FBI, being a law enforcement agency, when it needed to investigate a crime, would go out and get stuff. I don't really care if you turn it over. We're coming to take it. You've alleged that there's a crime that's occurred. We have to investigate and prosecute this. We can't just say, you know what, the DNC told us, and we're just going to take their word for it. So we have to investigate and prosecute. So give us the server, because we're going to do a forensic analysis, and we're going to determine exactly who hacked it. You know why the DNC wouldn't give over the server? Well, let me just say one of the reasons, because I'm sure there's a lot of reasons they wouldn't give over that server. Some of the information on that server is probably pretty damning to some of those people in the DNC and some of the nonsense that they pulled, making sure that Hillary got elected. But the point is, that server wasn't hacked. What we think happened was there was an individual involved in the campaign. He's been named, and we think that he secretly copied those files onto a thumb drive. And it's not just us that thinks this. It's literally the top agent that ever worked at the NSA, Bill Binney. This is his conclusion for his group that looked at it, because the transfer speeds on the download were way too fast for a hacking. And that's the key. It had to be a direct transfer to a thumb drive. And we pretty much know who did the transfer, and we're pretty sure it's Seth Rich. And this is the one thing that Julian Assange can prove. So now here we go. The Mueller report's about to be released. And what are they doing? I got to tell you some more about this when we come back from the break, folks. Stick around.
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. One of the things I always think is unique is when we delve into the whys of certain events and also the whens. And that's what we're talking about with Julian Assange.
Yeah, well, let me just try to bring this to a point as quickly as I can, the point I'm trying to make. And again, I wish we had a couple of hours to dive into some of the details here. But the Mueller report, which is about to be released, remember, the Mueller report apparently says that there was Russian hacking of the DNC servers. Julian Assange is the one person who's in a position to say, no, that is not where we WikiLeaks got those emails from. In fact, we got them from somebody named Seth Rich. And we think that's what he's going to say. And we're not just making that up, because he's essentially alluded to that in a roundabout way in interviews previously, that Seth Rich was the source for this DNC hack. Not the Russians, somebody on the inside. But now here's what's interesting. Obviously, people want to bring Julian Assange back to the U.S. and charge him and try maybe to shut him up. But one of the things that's interesting, I think, is that his only defense to some of these charges is going to be to out who his actual source was. And if Seth Rich is already dead, which we know he is, and he was the source, then there's really no journalistic reason that he has to maintain the secrecy of his source at this point. So is Julian Assange, is the president allowing this arrest and attempted extradition, which we suspect is going to work? We believe he'll wind up extradited to the U.S. at some point. Is President Trump kind of allowing that so that the truth about all this comes out? Because if the truth about all this comes out, then the entire Russian conspiracy story to hack the DNC servers to affect the election is shown to be the farce that we already know it is. So that's what I want you to watch for, is watch what happens here. I hope it's the latter. I really hope that Julian Assange is being extradited at this point for the reason that the president knows that if he can get him back to the U.S., he's going to tell the truth, and he's going to blow up this whole Russian conspiracy narrative. Of course, the other side of it is they put a gag order on him. They slap him with a bunch of semi-related criminal charges, but probably not directly related, and try to keep him quiet. So we'll see what happens here. One thing about Julian Assange that people have not been very successful about, and WikiLeaks as a whole group, is keeping them quiet. So I suspect if the information needs to come out to defend him, that it's going to come out here, and I'm excited because I want us to know the truth in these matters. I mean, isn't that what we're really looking for, is the truth?
I think so.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the truth, I mean, last week we got a little bit of truth from William Barr during his congressional testimony, where he acknowledged that he thought that there was potentially, or not potentially, but he really thought there was spying on the Trump campaign. And, we had all the pundits come out, and I just love it when they play word games with us. And we had them all say, well, I've never – James Comey, I don't know that word, spying. I don't understand the use of that word. I mean, I think they always do this to us. I mean, I almost wish I was like the Catholic nun and I had a ruler, because I would whack the crap out of James Comey's knuckles for pulling some crap like this. I don't know what spying is. I don't know what this stuff is.
Semantics.
Exactly. And I just want to tell you really quickly, what's the definition of a spy, which is obviously from where spying comes: to observe or search for something, or to watch secretly. Now, a lot of what you heard is they want to use the term surveillance. So what's the definition of the term surveillance? Close watch kept over someone or something. Geez, doesn't that sound like the same thing as spying? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they're the same dadgum thing. But we got all these people out there who want to play word games with everything. I mean, I hope you folks see that. When they start playing these word games, that shows you a guilty conscience right there. They want to play semantics. They want to play word games with you. Why don't you just own up to it or not?
These are not words with friends.
Right. Exactly. Thank you. By the way, I've never played that, so I don't know exactly how that reference works there. But I believe it. And speaking of believing it, would you believe how much views we've been getting on our YouTube page?
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, it's out of control,
I'll tell you
folks.
what, if you want to get in on the fun, Morgan Street Media. Go to YouTube, search Morgan Street Media, and you can catch all of these recent editions, recent episodes, and they're segmented for you. So if you just want to listen to little segments separately, you can do that. You can listen to the show in its entirety. But yes, it's gaining some momentum.
It's really gaining some momentum. And folks, we need your help. We need subscribers. We need likes. The more people that subscribe to it and the more people that click like on our videos, the more people that YouTube pushes our videos out to. And we can tell they're starting to push them out to some people because we're getting a lot of views from groups that we've never gotten views before. So we're moving now, and we need your help to keep moving. So if you would, please, if you enjoy our content, go out there on social media. Go to our YouTube page. Go to our Twitter page, which is @MoStreetman. If you have trouble remembering any of this, you can always find all of our links at morganstreetmedia.com, morganstreetmedia.com. And help us out with some likes and some subscriptions so that we can continue to spread the good word to good people near and far.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you don't want to listen to Morgan Street Media, if you're sort of the opposite of that, you're probably not listening right now.
That's right.
First and foremost. But you might want to try this new subscriber service, a young Detroit couple. They're the ones who helped Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez win the election last year with the slick video they put together. So now they're starting their own pro-socialism media company. So it's kind of like Netflix. It's called Means TV, Means. And it's kind of like Netflix. You pay $10 a month, and they offer you all this programming that has pro-worker, anti-capitalist viewpoints, including original TV shows, talk shows, comedy sketches, reality TV, and on-the-ground reporting. And they say they were radicalized by Bernie himself.
Ooh.
That's who really inspired them. And so this is kind of interesting. Pat, do you want to play a clip of an example of the video that's part of Means TV?
Another beautiful day under capitalism, the greatest, most functional economic system that's ever existed.
She's drinking coffee. I just spit the coffee.
Is there crude oil in this? Oh, no, it's just lead. It's fine. Don't worry. I'm here at my home in Los Angeles, California, to give you the guide to tremendous, lasting wealth success. How are you going to get there? Everyone wants to know. One word, easy answer. Capitalism. Capitalism. Capitalism is a mode of production. That means the way you make stuff. Under capitalism, there are two ways to make money, and you definitely have to make money. If you're lucky, you own something, like an apple farm or a glue factory, and that makes you the owning class. Nice. If you don't own anything, you're part of the working class, and you make your money by selling your labor. You pretty much sell your labor until you retire. Sorry, let's take that again. You pretty much sell your labor until you die. If you're a part of the owning class, there are a couple of rules about what you can and can't do, but ultimately, you're the one who decides how the product is made, where the profits go.
I think we know where this is going.
You're looking at my disgusted face here.
AOC was promoting this new Means TV, and so in one of her tweets, she says, how on earth, she's being facetious here, obviously, how on earth could young people whose wages are flat, cost of living skyrocketing, experiencing increased social instability via bigotry, addiction, and violence, expected to live shorter lifespans than previous generations, dare to question the larger economic forces in their lives? Now, we don't need to get into the two things she mentioned about social instability and shorter lifespans. That's a whole different discussion. I don't know that capitalism versus socialism is... I mean, I can see why you tie in the economic system, but we won't go there. But just the first two things, wages are flat, cost of living skyrocketing. AOC and some others of her ilk who tout how great socialism is and how terrible capitalism is, they're exceptions to the rule and doing really well in their and making money. Mm-hmm. And yet they're talking about all these others who aren't. But is there sort of the mindset that your expectations are higher than when, let's say, for example, when we were their age?
Right.
Is it that your expectations are higher and you're mad that because they
you're
did a new
spoiled.
study, like Gen Zers expect that they'll be given a promotion within the first year of work.
Right. You expect
I didn't have that expectation.
That life is here to do nothing but affirm you and fulfill all of your desires moment to moment. That's the purpose of life, right? You're not an individual who just has to make their way in the world. And if you're not in an advantageous economic position, sometimes you have to suck it up. I remember working at McDonald's when I was 15. I wasn't backsassing the manager. Did I like my manager? No, I did not like my manager. He was a jerk. But you know what? I did what he said because I worked for him, and that's what you do. I sucked it up, just like generations. Pat George, I'm sure you did the same when you were younger.
I worked many crazy jobs, and sweating and hard work is not in the vocabulary with the kids
it's really
that are coming
not.
out. It really, really is not.
And it's just crazy. And I just want to jump back to something, though, because I love the way you started this out about this new Means TV, which you got to love. First of all, they're bemoaning. They're trying to restate the class struggle. And we already dealt with this, folks. This is a false struggle that is created through the use of words and an analysis of the world, but it doesn't lead us to a positive outcome. And that's called the 19th century. We've already dealt with communism. But no, now here we are going to have to go back through and relearn the lessons of the last 100 years.
You know what's scary about what we just heard, too? Did you see how many views? 1.27 million.
I want to get more views than that. Come on, folks. Go out there and view our videos. At least we should be able to defeat Means TV. But let me finish this thought because I didn't get to what I want to say. This is what you said originally. Means TV is $10 a month.
Oh, people
$10 a month.
You talk about all those views, Pat, but I would say probably the majority of them, even if it's a small majority, or even if it's a small majority.
$10 a month.
Yes, $10
a lot of people don't have that kind of excess capital.
We're ripping them for having that. Like, wait, you're charging $10 a month? I thought you said that we're going to share all of these assets.
Right. That's what I'm saying. There are poor people out there, part of the working class, that they supposedly care so much about, who cannot afford $10 a month for some stupid specialty channel.
How much are you charging?
I don't charge anything, right? I just put them up there on YouTube.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
How about that?
Go out there, right? The capitalist stuff is free. The communist stuff, they want $10 a month for. I mean, run that through your head. It doesn't work.
If you want to see this video, we'd prefer that you watch Morgan Street Media.
Absolutely.
But if you want to check this out on Twitter, it's hilarious. The comments, people are just absolutely ripping them.
Well, it's a failed ideology. It does not work. It turns people against people. There's no reason for that based on class. It's similar to turning people against people based on race, and they're merging those together, as we saw from some of the comments from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at the National Action Network. It's also the same as turning people against people based on religion, and they're really pushing that too. They're really pushing, all these divisions between people, but they're doing it in such a way that they claim they're being inclusive. That's what's crazy about it.
Right. And then the other side of things, I think Instagram plays into a lot of this because you've got a younger generation who's all into a part of that. All you do is get bombarded with all these images of people doing cool stuff 24/7, people from the Kardashians to regular people who are only posting the coolest things that they do.
Right.
And then you have that false perception that, hey, I'm not going to be successful until I have disposable income and am able to travel and buy everything that I see that these other people have. So your expectations are skewed. And then, like you said, you have this world of likes. So we're all just thinking, okay, everybody likes everything. Let's just share everything. That'll work.
All right, folks, we'll be right back. We've got some interesting stuff on Michael Avenatti. And, folks, I'm not bragging either, but I sure would like for you to go out there and check out our very hot YouTube page at Morgan Street Media is how you can find us on YouTube. Give us a like and a subscribe.
You can just go to morganstreetmedia.com, and that'll take you everywhere you want to go.
Yeah. And, we're going to have to squeeze in a couple of things because, as you know, we're entering into the fourth quarter here. The walls are closing in on us time-wise for this show, and we've got so many things left that we wanted to mention to you, a couple of issues, before we get to our Out There. So what I think I'm going to end up having to do, Pat George, and we'll see how it goes, I may have to string this out there over 2 weeks because we've got some really interesting stuff to tell you about in our Out There segment. But before we get to that, I just wanted to give you a brief update on Michael Avenatti. And this is a segment that we ought to title, Oh, How the Mighty Have Fallen. I mean, here's a guy that was on CNN like every day last year. He was on CNN like 120-something times last year, and has just been an absolute media darling. Remember when he was representing Stormy Daniels, and he would go on TV and say all these horrible things about the president, and that Don Jr. was just about to be indicted next week, and, trust him because when he says trust him, like Avenatti saying, trust me because I have a good track record of predictions. I always know what's going to happen. And, of course, toward the end there, his track record went from, well, let's say good to, he could never get anything right. And, again, what has happened to Michael Avenatti lately? We're not going to have time to discuss all this, so I'm just going to run through some things. He's been fired by Stormy Daniels, who, by the way, said that he was embezzling money from her because he set up these GoFundMe accounts in her name and never accounted to her for the money. Got a couple $1 million and never showed her how it was spent. I mean, that money should have gone to her if he didn't spend it all. But a guy like that, he never returns money to a client. He always spends it all, which is part of the reason that he's in bankruptcy trouble. We know he's been in bankruptcy, and there's a lot of allegations that he's lied to the bankruptcy trustee about different accounts. He's been setting up different trust accounts. Just last week, they seized his twin-engine jet in California, which he says, like water off a duck's back. I wasn't even using the jet anymore. Now, don't believe that for a second, folks. When you know what a jet costs you to maintain over the year, if you're not using it anymore, you sell it, right? Mm-hmm. But anyway, they seized his jet. He's also been charged in an extortion scheme trying to extort Nike, the company, for $25 million. Now, these are all separate issues. And then late last week, he was indicted in California on a 36-count indictment, including things like bank fraud and embezzlement of client funds. And this may not be the end for him. So for a 48-year-old guy who just a couple of years ago was basically on top of the world, we're going to see just exactly how far he falls. Now, he maintains that he's innocent of all these charges, of course, and we will grant him the assumption that he is innocent until the court cases are resolved. But that's a lot of smoke there, folks, and we've brought to you examples of some of his bad behavior. And we've read about him. I've researched some of what he's done in the bankruptcy court. And I'll just tell you, from what I can see online, it doesn't look good for him. There's some real serious violations that appear through the record. And maybe there's a good explanation for him. Maybe he's got an excuse. Maybe there's a way out of it. But it doesn't look good right now for Michael Avenatti. So, oh, how the mighty have fallen. And we should remember that. Sometimes you can be on top of the world, but if you got there in a dastardly way, you're going down, kind of like a Bernie Madoff. There was a point at which Bernie Madoff was absolutely on top of the world, and nobody would have ever thought that he would fall so far. But now he's spending the rest of his life in federal prison. He spent more time in federal prison than he ever spent on top of the world. So these are things to think about. Another story that we're not going to get to do any justice to is the Greg Craig arrest from last week. Greg Craig is a former Obama-era White House counsel and a member of the law firm of Williams and Connolly. Now, we had one of our listeners actually give me a tip, and I thought this was very interesting stuff, but I haven't been able to chase this one down completely. And that is, was Greg Craig actually involved in taking possession of Hillary Clinton's email server? Now, here's the thing. We know at the time David Kendall was Hillary Clinton's lawyer, and David Kendall worked at the firm Williams & Connolly. The server was taken into the firm Williams & Connolly. Now, here's the thing. Where did Greg Craig also work? Williams & Connolly. Now, Craig is accused of being an unregistered, undisclosed agent for the pro-Russian Ukrainian government. You remember the same thing that John and Tony Podesta were doing, but that they did not get in trouble for? The same thing that they busted Paul Manafort for and ruined his life for, which they let several other people doing the exact same thing off, including John and Tony Podesta. Well, now they've decided that Greg Craig needs to be held accountable for this. But my question would be, okay, was he an agent of a foreign government, of the Russian government at the time that Williams & Connolly had possession of Hillary Clinton's email server, which contained classified special access program materials, which he should not have had? This is a very good question. So, folks, if you can do some research for us, help us to track this down. Help us to find the reference in the media to the fact that Greg Craig had something to do with that server when it was in Williams & Connolly's possession, because we've gotten that tip, and I've been steady trying to look for it. But they remake the content online. They don't make it easy for you to find the stuff that really shows what crooks they are. They make that really hard to find, and all the stuff you can find through Google is all the propaganda, positive nonsense about what they've done. So we're trying to research this and peel back some of the layers of the onion, and I'm soliciting you, our audience's help to do that, because that could be a huge story if we can chase that one down. Well, now I see, what have we got, 1 minute and 40 seconds for our Out There segment. So this is one we're going to have to hold over, I think, because this one is absolutely fascinating, and this is on forbidden archaeology. And it involves Atlantis, the flood myths. I mean, there's been a universal flood myth throughout pretty much all cultures in the history of the world have had a mythology or a statement of something that they believe happened in the past, that the world was completely flooded. So we've got examples of that. In the Bible, the most obvious one that probably everybody knows about is the story of Noah, right? But you've also got the Epic of Gilgamesh, which tells basically the exact same story, although there are some definite changes in it, but it's very similar to the Noah tale. Well, then we've got, from the Greeks, we've got the Plato's story of Atlantis, which apparently was passed down from the Egyptians to Plato, to the Greeks. So we've got the story of, the city that's flooded in a day, and the city with great technology and everything else. Well, one of the things I wanted to get into, and like I said, we just really don't have time to do this any justice, but I want to tell you, and we'll probably tease this for next week. Do you know that there is an underwater city that was found just off the west of Cuba? Now, here's the crazy thing. In 650 meters of water, that's 2,000 feet approximately of water. Now, this is a huge city. In fact, they call it Cuba's Atlantis. Pat George, is somewhere between the western part of Cuba and Cozumel. So next time you go on a cruise down to Cozumel, you might be driving right over the top of Cuba's Atlantis in 2,000 feet of water. But here's what's crazy. The last time they think that part of the land was actually above water, 50,000 years ago. I mean, they've got a whole city down there with pyramids and other things. You got to look at some of the data, but we're going to come back next week and we're going to fill you in on some of that stuff, because we got a lot more to cover there. There's a lot of underwater cities that we found throughout history, and it just draws into question all of our historical records. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it.
Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.